I think that means we're supposed to start. What are we waiting on? Are they on, are they on remote? Okay. Got a minute. Got less than that. Dogs again? Oh. Sure. Yeah. We have the vice president. I know, fashionably late. Who else are we missing? I'm fashionably late, that's okay. Who's missing? We will now bring to order, because we're only one short, the Woodland Park Planning Commission meeting of May 27th. First thing we'll start with is order and roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
After we do that, we'll have a pledge.
Okay. Beginning with John DeVoe,
Here.
Ken Hartsfield,
Yes.
Lee Brown,
Here.
Ellen Carrick,
Here.
Larry Larson,
Here.
Vicky Good.
Here.
And Mr. Chairman, for the record, Al Bungie is absent.
Thank you. Or fashionably late, one of the two. Would you join us with the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item will be to approve the minutes of April 22nd, 2021. Anybody have any additions, corrections, comments? If not, we'll look for a motion to approve.
So move to approve?
And a second.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Approved. Public hearings. Item A, sub 2021-06. UYO subdivision final plat. A request by NES Incorporated applicant and New Life Holding Corporation property owners for a minor subdivision for a one lot plot of 10+ acres located at 1121 Sturman Parkway in the planned unit development PUD. The city council meeting on this will be on June 17th. At this point, Sally, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Planning Commissioners. As just read into the title, this is a 10-acre tract of land located at 1121 Sturman Parkway. Oops. Okay. And after this evening, the public hearing is at the council meeting on June 17th. This is a quasi judicial case, so it will move forward to city council. The map on the screen is a vicinity map. The site is shown highlighted in red. The just to locate or get you oriented on this map, this on the far left is the intersection of Highway 67 and 24. And so the site is to the west of the ridge of Gold Hill on what is known as the Sturman PUD. This property is owned by New Life Holding Corporation. And north of it is Meadowood Park, Evergreen Heights. To the northeast is the Evergreen Heights subdivision. To the west is the Pike National Forest and a platted tract of land that is in a conservation easement and was platted 2 years ago. To the south is Trout Creek Road, and Sturman Parkway does tie into Trout Creek Road. And further south is Karis Bible College and Highway 24. The Gold Hill antennas are located up here on the top of the ridge. So that is the vicinity map and the surrounding uses. The next aerial is zoomed in, showing the location a little bit closer. Trout Creek floodplain is just to the west. And then to the north, this ridge is known as the Three Sisters. And to the south was the former Sturman's property that was recently platted and sold. And then the Armstrong subdivision is just to the east. Sturman Parkway traverses north all the way to Meadowood Park and south to the Trout Creek Road and past the Andrew Womack Ministries headquarters. The next map is of the 2010 comprehensive plan map, and it reflects the Sturman planned unit development PUD uses on the north end, and the subject property is located approximately where the star is. The north end is residential, single family residential. And within the Sturman PUD, there are approximately 90 single family units in this yellow area. Then on the south side of the Sturman PUD, it is slated for commercial development, light manufacturing, industrial. Further south is where Karis Bible College is located, and that is slated in the comprehensive plan as mixed use. So it could be commercial, which is what the college is, or residential use. So that's the comprehensive plan map, which this request for a single family lot is consistent with. The zoning map shows this entire area, including Evergreen Heights, the Sturman PUD, and the Karis Bible College property as PUD. The top of the ridge is still zoned agriculture, and that was annexed into the city back in 2000, 20 years ago, 21 years ago, and was zoned agricultural as a holding zone until there is a proposal for this property. However, the annexation agreement does limit any development below a certain elevation. And then the third map I'm going to show you is the amended Sturman PUD plan from 2016. And it was amended when the subdivision occurred on the west side of this 300-acre parcel, 300-acre plus. And it is under a conservation easement and only allows for 2 homes. But as I mentioned, there are about 90 homes planned in this area that is highlighted in pink. And then further south is the headquarters for Andrew Womack Ministries. And you can see these gray circles. That was for the commercial, industrial, light manufacturing use in this area. I know that Andrew Womack Ministries and New Life Holdings Corporation are working on a new master plan for this entire area. And we'll be able to present that sometime in the near future, so that they will be coming forward with another amendment to this PUD based on their master planning efforts. But for tonight, it's a simple subdivision, 10 acres for 1 single family home that is just north of the existing home. And in your packet was the plat. This is a minor subdivision that shows Sturman Parkway and how the property is fairly rectangular for the 10-acre 1-lot subdivision. I only have one photograph for you just to show you Sturman Parkway. This is at their north gate. It is a private road at this time, but in some time in the future, the city has informed the owner that this is would be very beneficial to have as a public road in order to provide for egress on the western side of our community. Right now, the Northwood subdivision and other subdivisions in the west side of Woodland Park are basically all giant cul-de-sacs that only go to the east out to Highway 67. There is a plan in the future to tie Stone Ridge into Meadowood Park, and this roadway would provide for evacuation routes and interconnections. But at this time, it is not on the table to do until there is future development of this area. The access and utilities easement is a 60-foot wide swath north to south. As far as the staff review, pertinent to Title 17, our subdivision regulations, the final plat was reviewed based on the drawings by a licensed surveyor, the appropriate information on the plat and the minor subdivision. The staff also requested additional documents, which included a wildfire mitigation plan, and that was included in the submittal. There is also a requirement for an improvement guarantee because the water line does not extend north to this property. So about 700 feet of a water main will need to be installed, which is required by the property owner. And that is secured with 150% guarantee or security, either a letter of credit, escrow agreement, or cash, in order to guarantee that that water line will be installed prior to the certificate of occupancy. As far as dedications are concerned, I mentioned the public road right away. That is not applicable at this point in time. since the property is served with a recorded easement for access and utilities. There are no proposed park dedications with this small subdivision. So as a result, they're required to pay fees in lieu of park dedication. And that is about $2,100 and must be paid prior to the recording. As far as design standards, it's been evaluated for lot sizes, easements, and siting, which are all appropriate. And then with the improvements, the water main extension is required, which all comply. With the referral for this property or this case, it was published in the Pikes Peak Courier, the agenda and the notice. Letters were sent to adjacent property owners within 150 feet. There were actually 3 posters installed at the north end of Sturman Parkway and the south end. We chose to do that since it is a private street at this point, and then on the property. And there was a review internally by the city staff and externally by various agencies such as the fire district. And the fire district worked with the state forest and the property owner on the fire mitigation plan, wildfire mitigation plan. IREA, the electric company, Black Hills, etc., and had no concerns. So with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend that City Council approve the UYO subdivision based on findings of conformance to the subdivision and zoning regulations as described in the staff report and as presented this evening at the public hearing, subject to the following conditions. And I did abbreviate these conditions, just summarized them. They're fairly lengthy and wordy in the staff report that asks for additional notes on the plat, but I'll just quickly go through them. So prior to approval of the plat by City Council, which will take place on June 17th, the subdivider must submit a subdivision development agreement and the security of 150% of the value of the water line installation, as well as remit the park's capital fee, which is $21.33. Prior to producing the final Mylar, that must be revised so that we have a description and location of the easements on page 2 that are referenced by 3 different reception numbers. And these are primarily the access and utility easements. Delete a trail and under the council's certificate. Delete in note number 3, number 9, because it is redundant. Correct the ownership for tract A to New Life Holdings and the ownership for lot 1 Sturman Parkway, filing 1, who are the Pearsons. And then add a header title that specifically describes the wildfire hazard and the mitigation requirements, which is to create defensible spaces along the driveway and around the perimeter of the home. And this does not mean to clear cut those defensible spaces, but to limb up the trees, thin the trees, and remove the slash. So it's all laid out in the wildfire mitigation plan. Continuing on, add the building envelope and the disturbance area around the house and the driveway on the plat. Add a note regarding the maximum height of this home will be 35 feet, which is measured at mean grade. So the back of the home may be built into the hillside and the front may be taller, but it averages out to 35 feet at this site. Accessory structures are limited to 20 feet tall. And then the setbacks, which on a 10-acre site has no problem meeting standard setback requirements for 25 front, rear, and 8 on the side. Also add a note regarding that this is hillside lots, which require engineered foundations and retaining walls. Add another note regarding the water line installation prior to occupancy. And a final note regarding the erosion, potential erosion, and the requirement to manage that sediment transfer and erosion. So with that, staff recommends approval of this 10-acre lot at this site. And this evening, New Life Holding is represented by NES and John Romano, who is here to be able to speak with you. And if we'd like to hold questions and hear the applicant's presentation next, then that would be fine. Or if council or if Planning Commission has questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Okay.
Sally, I have a question. We keep on referring to it as a lot, meaning one, but there's a lot of references like under the conditions, number H, it says hillside lots. And is it one lot for one resident? Is that correct? Or?
It is one lot. We can certainly remove the plural reference.
Because they're in there several times, and when I was pre-looking at everything and going over everything, I kind of got a little bit confused as to what direction, what
partly
was
because
happening.
our code defines it at plural. So
Okay.
we'll make that tweak.
Okay, thanks.
John? Do you want your?
Absolutely. John Romero with NES. Sally, thank you very much. You did a great job of presenting this. So I'll try not to go too long on this for you all. Just want to go over a couple key things that weren't mentioned, but just kind of let you know where we're going with the subdivision plat. So I am John Romero with NES representing the New Life Holdings. As Sally mentioned, this site is just off of Sturman Parkway, sometimes known as Innovation Way, just southwest of the Evergreen Heights development. As Sally mentioned, there was a 2016 PUD approved that had permitted residential uses with 63 total residential uses up to 90. That's not what's being proposed tonight. It's just that was what's in the past PUD plan. No major PUD changes to the PUD are being proposed at the moment. As Sally mentioned, it is we are going to look at kind of a larger master plan for this, which will kind of set framework for PUD amendments in the future. But for right now, it's just the one lot subdivision. So the current application, as Sally mentioned, was for a 10-acre subdivision, single family home. This is for a final plat. There is also subsequent applications for a single family ZDP and a multi-use CDP, which will address the water line extension and then the site plan as mentioned. That site plan, as Sally had mentioned, that will identify maximum building heights for both the main structure and the accessory structure. With the current PUD, it did identify 0 lot setbacks, but we are agreeing to the conditions that Sally had mentioned in regards to the additions of the notes for for clarity with wildfire mitigation, setbacks, so on and so forth. So the 25-foot setback is definitely something that will be achieved. Just for reference, the house as it sits on the lot is centered in the lot. So it's about 300 feet from Sturman and 200 on the north and south portions of the site. Again, proper wildfire mitigation will be handled with the project. We did meet early on with the fire department to kind of discuss access, fire department turnaround, those types of items, additional hydrants as needed, just make sure there's proper coverage. And with that, I'm here for any questions. Again, Sally, thank you so much, and leave it to you guys to, any questions you have for me, I'm here to answer.
At this point, we can consider the next item where we ask questions of either the applicant or staff.
One quick question.
Sure.
We talk about a water line extension.
Yes, sir.
Could you just review the scope of what that extension is?
Yes, so there is services on site within Sturman Parkway Innovation Way, but the water line is short, so there will be about a 700-foot line extension, public line extension for an 8-inch PVC, so they can get service to the site and proper fire.
Thank you.
And
I've
if I
got-
might add, those engineering drawings or civil engineering drawings are under review currently.
Vicky?
And then I've got a question concerning, I know that there's safety, private gates on either end going in. And you had mentioned, or Sally had mentioned that Stone Ridge and Sturman were going to be tied in together later on in the future. Is there going to be a third gate, or are the gates going to be going away?
That's
Just-
not something we've currently looked at. I don't think, so the gates are there just, I think from the past Sturman Parkway, but they are generally open. So, but
Okay.
I think those future connections will be evaluated with kind of the larger subdivision discussions.
Do we have any map showing where, I mean, I know that this is something different, but it was brought up in the presentation. Do we know where in Stone Ridge it's going to be tying in? Is there any map? Do we have any maps? Just out of
I'll
curiosity.
just describe it beyond Meadowood Park. There will be a road that takes off north between Majestic Park and Meadowood Park. And it will tie into Stone Ridge from Meadowood.
But
Okay.
outside the current development.
Yes,
Yeah.
outside the holdings property.
John, you've seen the conditions as recommended by staff.
Yep.
Do you accept all those conditions?
Absolutely, yep.
Anybody else have any? Okay, if not, what we'll do is we'll open the public comment. Is anybody signed up to? John, you may have to come back. Okay. First one is Linda Martin.
Thank you, Commission. Linda Martin, Woodland Park. For the record, I would like it noted that I believe that with our planning commission, we need to stop approving building in Woodland Park City. There are concerns with the citizens, even with city staff, about water right now. And I think it's imperative that we do a water review, even have Mr. Wiley come to these meetings, come to city council meetings and present what is going on with our water and what we need to do to mitigate any water issues that we may have. I don't know how many taps are going to be required for this said property. There apparently is already an issue with a water line. I think we need to review our water issues before the people who have been here since 1984 are paying the price for all the new development.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sally, can you address that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Currently, the city has ample water to serve at least another 550 units. And then we will be developing another amount of water that will serve another 500 units. So I know that the staff and our community has worked very, very hard since the implementation of the TAP management plan in the mid 1990s to grow in a moderate fashion and manage that growth so that we keep our water availability and supplies consistent with what is being approved. And we have been tracking through a vacant lot study and land use study that build out scenario so that we don't approve projects that we are unable to serve. Now, I know there may be some concerns since water restrictions were recently applied. But water is a very complicated scenario, and it is very dependent upon snow melt and rain. So when you're in a drought circumstance and that the snowpack is less than average, then our augmentation water, and I'll explain what augmentation means. Our augmentation water does not yield as large of shares or acre feet as we would hope. And the city of Woodland Park has one small reservoir for storage. So the precaution of having water restrictions is to put that in place when we are under drought restrictions or drought conditions, and the augmentation water is less. Now, what augmentation water means is that the city must supplement or augment the water that is consumed within the city. So we draw our raw water out of mostly wells from over by the golf course. That is treated. It becomes potable water or water that can be consumed. A good portion of that is recycled through our water treatment plant and is placed back into Trout Creek. But a portion of that is used for irrigation or it evaporates. And that is the augmentation portion, the consumable water that we must replenish. And replenishing that into the creek requires us to purchase water shares, mostly from the Continental Divide, and transfer that water to Woodland Park through the homestake line. So we are not in a situation where we cannot serve more development. In fact, we have at least, when we're fully built out, about 1,100 taps remaining for growth. And we're watching that build out very carefully. So Linda, we appreciate your question. And as Mr. Wiley will be able to explain that further at the city council meeting.
And that is one tap for that one lot.
One lot, one tap.
And there's already been allocated 90 taps.
Not allocated.
What's
I
the
have
right
to
word?
use the word planned.
Planned.
We are planned for about 90 taps. There are 66 taps on the Sturmans, and then there are another 35 lots planned on a portion, a 35-acre tract that was part of the Evergreen Heights PUD.
Okay. Linda, are you aware that the city is undertaking a comprehensive plan update?
Yes, sir.
That that issue that you brought up there is certainly being discussed right now by one of the subcommittees for utilities. I serve on that committee and we take your comments very seriously.
With all due respect, Mr. Wiley, last city council meeting, I believe it was last city council.
You'll need to come to the.
I believe it was at the last city council meeting that Mr. Wiley, I don't want to use the word voiced a concern, but commented if we have more zone changes, so from commercial to residential, that can create an issue with said plan, said water plan. And that, I guess, creates an issue in my mind that I will have to uproot any sort of yard that I may have in my home so that we can accommodate new overpriced houses. That concerns me.
I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I appreciate your looking into it.
Okay.
Linda, one of the things that you might do is attend the Utilities Advisory Board meetings in which they discuss all of that. And you could certainly ask those questions. They're open meetings to go to. And you can ask anything you want about that at that meeting.
And I think what might be nice is if the community is made very aware of that, even through the Facebook page, the Woodland Park community page. We have a lot of community members, just normal, everyday citizens who go to that page. They don't go to the Woodland Park, City of Woodland Park page. They go to the community page. I'm not aware of a utility advisory committee. We need to make people aware of stuff like that so that people will be calmer about situations with things as important as water and growth.
If you would come up to City Hall, I'm sure that Sally could provide you with a list of all the committees and their meeting times and all that stuff. We'd be more than happy to do
Okay.
that.
And then I'll post it on the Woodland Park community page.
Okay,
Perfect. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Bonnie Sumner.
Okay, I have many questions.
Name, rank, and serial number.
Bonnie Sumner, I and my husband live in the Majestic Park subdivision, which is 2 inches outside of the city of Woodland Park. So Sturman Parkway goes like this, and right here is City of Woodland Park. Right here, we are outside of City of Woodland Park. When we moved here, Sturman was here. They had their factory, they had their home, they hosted community events, whatever. And then the Charis Bible College, Andrew Womack Ministries came in. And I'm going to try to be as calm as possible. As far as I'm concerned, they are a parasite on the city of Woodland Park. I have spoken to people who would like to remain anonymous, from law enforcement, from NETCO firemen, from helping agencies, you name it. They do not pay taxes. They take and they take and they take, and they are expanding more and more and more. And Andrew Womack himself, on a YouTube video, which any of you can watch, has said in so many words, we want to take over the city of Woodland Park for Christians who feel as we do.
Is there anything relative to
Yes,
this that
there
you want
is.
to talk about?
There absolutely is. This area is in my backyard. When I come out of my subdivision to go up Evergreen Heights in the morning, people going into Womack Ministries are like smashing down on a regular basis. I wish the cops would sit there and give them tickets. That's minor. We got some communication, and you were talking about the water line. We got a communication from Black Hills Energy saying, we would like to survey your private land. This whole subdivision is private. The city does not maintain anything in our subdivision. We would like to look at and have drones and put down markers to look at your area, because we need to enlarge the gas pipe. I haven't heard one word about that. We need to enlarge the gas pipe. why do you need to enlarge the gas pipe? And to my amusement, the gentleman from Black Hills Energy said, well, there's the dog park. There's Meadowood, and oh yes, there's Karis Bible College. They need to enlarge the gas line to service what Womack is building and building and building and building.
Certainly not for one home.
Certainly not, absolutely not. But like, how is this not connected when this is coming up that all of a sudden they're saying, we may have to tear up your private streets to get more gas up to Womack?
That you need to take up, and you've got an excellent husband that can address that.
Okay, I understand that. I would just like everyone here and the public and any of the presses here to understand that it is inconceivable to me that for whatever reason, the powers that be in the city of Woodland Park do not worry and are not concerned that private citizens who have made this their home may have to leave because of this encroaching parasite on our community. That's
Thank
all.
you.
I'm done.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, Mark Sumner is next. Okay.
I'm Mark Sumner. I live in Majestic Heights with Bonnie. I just have a couple of questions. When you talk about, and this involves water, when you talk about tap fees, it's my recollection, or taps, it's my recollection, and I could be wrong about this, that when the land was zoned for the Bible College, there was at least an oral commitment to build dormitories that would be taxable. How are they evaluated for the purpose of taps? At one point in time, we were told that it was possibly as many as 3,000 students, which in a town the size of Woodland Park is, significant. So that's a question I would have about water and the proposed dormitories, which I don't believe have been, I don't think ground is broken. I could be wrong.
Why don't you ask all your questions and then we'll
Okay,
have the
fine,
applicant.
Fine,
come
sure,
up.
I don't mind. This is another question. I'm just curious how far the subject property is from, because I can't tell from the handouts, how far the subject property is from the corner of Evergreen Heights and Sturman Parkway. Another question would be, has any thought or planning been given to the actual residents in terms of the size of the residents? What's the footprint, that type of thing. And then lastly, what would be the tax status, the real estate tax status of carving out a 10-acre parcel, which I assume would accommodate a significant home, from the balance of this property, which is currently exempt, I believe. So would that residence be taxable? That's it.
That it?
Yep.
Sally, could you address that?
Actually, I'll ask John to answer the questions about the dormitories, the distance, the residents, and the tax status.
Thank you so much. Appreciate everybody's comments. The distance from Evergreen Heights, I would say, is about probably like a quarter mile. It's as you get to the peak of Innovation Way. In regards to the tax status, I'll let it will be a taxable property, obviously, under the residential code. In regards to the footprint size, the actual footprint is only about, I think about 4,000 square feet for the footprint itself. It's a little bit under there. I think it's 36 or 38. And in regards to the dormitories, again, just want to remind everybody here, we're here for the subdivision, but there is discussions that we're having, and we've started with Sally, the city manager, the city engineer, and Karis about the future of the development and understanding kind of the capacities of that, the capacities that are in Woodland Park, and thinking about a plan forward that gives everybody a proper vision for that and understanding of what that means. And in regards to the dormitories, those are not currently something that we're looking at the moment, but it is something that is considered about the impacts to housing on Woodland Park and what that means and how we address that.
Thank you.
Yep.
And
I've
if
got
I
a
can
question.
just add from a water standpoint, in 2011, 12, when Karis Bible College was going through their PUD process, our previous city and utilities director looked at that very carefully and limited the dormitories to 500 bedrooms. And that will be a commercial tap. But all our water planning is based upon residential use with commercial, public, and a cushion.
I've got a question. Earlier, it was stated that there was going to be an 8-inch water line brought in for this particular subdivision. Do we know, generally speaking, how many houses does an 8-inch water line actually supply?
I cannot speak to that, but it should be noted that that's a public water main. And so that's why that's being extended, because to get utility service for the lot itself. So the lot itself will not be using 8-inch, it's for the services itself. That is a public water main.
Is part of that
Extension.
fire flow as well?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay.
So in all actuality, it could later on feed 90 houses, that one line coming in.
Depending upon what the needs are, yes. But right now it's tying into a 10-inch main going down to an 8. So yes, that is a public main.
Okay, so it wouldn't like later on feed 90 houses plus the 500 dorms. I don't think it would, but
The dorms aren't even near
Yeah.
this area.
okay.
And just know that those are pretty much standard size for a main, and that the water mains must be looped. So this main will eventually tie into Evergreen Heights and over to Meadowood Park. And you must loop internally in subdivisions and cannot serve more than 12 homes on a dead end line. So, and that's all in order to have good pressure and fire hydrants serviced with adequate supplies.
Thank you.
No problem.
One thing for Mr. Sumner's question, and if I'm wrong, correct me, Sally, all the dormitories and that are planned are taxable. They're taxable. They're not nonprofit. Just so you know that. Okay. Okay. Anybody else from the audience want to talk about this? You haven't signed up? That's fine. Anybody want to come up and speak to this? Does anybody up here have any other questions they'd like to ask of the applicant or the staff?
Mr. Chairman, we have one gentleman, Joe Fury, on Zoom who had his hand up.
Joe, I didn't see that hand up, but you can certainly come on and talk to us.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you all hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, I think my question was answered, but I wasn't sure if it was a yes or a no. Is this property the subject of the meeting tonight? Is this property going to be taxed by the city and the county as the rest of the citizens are taxed?
Yes, it will be taxed for property tax as at the residential rate within the city of Woodland Park.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else remotely want to ask any questions? Okay. Oh, sure. You can ask two if you want to, Mark.
When you, this is just a general question about taps. When you, this home, if it has a 4,000 square foot footprint, might be a 10,000 square foot home. And a home of that size might have, 5, 6 bathrooms, et cetera. Or is it the same for, a home with two baths and 5 baths? Does the city evaluate the water usage, or do they base it on bathrooms?
It's a great question, because in about 2012, the city decided to have 3 tap fee tiers, so that a smaller home with fewer fixture units would pay a smaller tap fee, and a much larger home will pay tier 3 tap fees. And then your rates, your monthly rates are charged based on your usage. So larger homes contribute more to the system. So that was put in place in order to recognize a more equitable system in terms of usage.
And Mark, if you need a copy of that, you can, it's a fixture count situation. Every time you add any type of thing that draws water, it's part of the fixture count, and there's a percentage given to a bath tub versus a washer, that kind of stuff. It's laid out. Yes, ma'am.
So one more quick question. I'm just curious, is this the first time that any of you have heard about the issue I brought up about Black Hills Energy needing to do something about gas in that area, which could potentially raise rates for people? I mean, if they have to change the gas line, that's construction. Someone has to pay for it. It's not like they are philanthropists who are going to take the, could I ask you to look into that?
We're happy to look into that. Staff has been working with Black Hills Energy for the past year, because this is a high pressure main line that doesn't just service Woodland Park, but it actually connects all the way over to Cripple Creek.
Yes.
So they are upgrading that line because it's very old and needs to be reliable.
You may have read this in the paper, but a number of years back out there in Stone Ridge, that they installed a temporary line because Cripple Creek was not getting enough gas.
Was
And
a
that whole-
compressor.
Compressor. There was a compressor out there to boost the pressure from that line. So that was done 7, 8 years ago, because I was on council and we all went out there and looked what was going on. So that's part of the whole area is what that is.
Okay, so this is something I know nothing about. All I know is that I was told it was not an issue of a deteriorating gas line or new equipment. It was an issue of increased need for gas in that area, which makes me think that if you have one of the largest users of gas, which is the Bible College, then it doesn't seem like it could just be a coincidence. All of a sudden, we're not getting enough gas.
I
So
think
I
what-
would just,
I think one thing you should do, you call up Sally, maybe can provide you with the information. Black Hills Energy
I
and
did.
talk to them.
I did,
Did they answer
I
you?
did. It's all up in the air.
Okay.
We don't know what's going on. So on our private property, I noticed something. We have new neighbors with small children, and I noticed an orange disc. I thought it was a Frisbee, maybe from our new neighbors, but it's not a Frisbee. It is some sort of device that is screwed into our private property that allows the drone to follow the lines of the gas line, or where it could be, or where it should be. This is not my area of expertise. And again, this is private property. They did not have permission to do this, okay? And I did call Black Hills Energy, and gentleman I spoke to said, well, we're just looking, we're not sure, but we need to have more gas coming into this area. It's not that what's there is broken down. It's not big enough to bring in more gas. And to your point about needing more water and more gas, and it's just not infinite. And we have wells, but how do we know that bigger water lines bringing in more users of water are not going to drain the water that we depend on for our wells? I mean, it's a very complicated issue. And when you say that it's in the Courier or whatever, and I agree with you, it's got to be on the community page. People do not pay attention. People just don't realize what is going on until it's too late. And then once it happens, you can't put it back in the bottle. It's
Well,
too
you
late.
have a representative from the Free Press here,
From-
and he certainly can do an article for you that's in this county. Okay, and,
What paper are you from? Well, I'm
and,
sorry.
and,
that the
and we're-
Courier's-
and we're all concerned, we all lived here.
Yeah,
We're as concerned
exactly.
about it.
That's my point. And we are newcomers fairly. And I really feel badly for people who have been here for so long and have planned their lives, planned for their families, planned for their retirement. And all of a sudden, it's being taken over by an entity that does not care what it does to the community.
You have a good attorney in the family that can help you with that. Okay.
Don't go away, Bonnie. Bonnie, come back, come back. Are you currently served by Black Hills Energy Gas right now?
Absolutely.
So they have a right of easement to transport the gas to you, probably through the main streets into your area. So they have the right to service their line.
We discussed easements. I
Okay.
discussed easements with them.
Well, I wanted to know that, and know that they had a customer relationship with Majestic Park.
I
Sounds like they
absolutely
do.
discussed easements with them.
And then I will also ask you the same question I asked Linda. Are you aware of the city is in the process of updating our comprehensive plan?
A little bit because I am involved in Firewise.
Okay.
So I am more, that's my area of expertise, but this other stuff is not my area of expertise.
Well, I urge you to get involved. And you can get involved by going to the city webpage. And you'll find lots of information. There's surveys for you to fill out. There's information about utilities, land use, so on and so forth. Now is the time to come forward to voice these concerns and how we're going to address those in the future.
So I
So-
should communicate with Sally.
Go to the website first and certainly contact Sally. Sally would be glad to help you.
There's a flyer on the back table
Okay,
that
good.
helps give you the website
Okay, thank you.
and my phone number.
Anybody else? By golly, we just get everybody all excited. We're gonna come and talk. and We love that. Seriously. Okay.
Billy Cropperell, Woodland Park. Question I have, you said something about outbuildings being in this single house. Was there supposed to be, is that what I heard?
There are no accessory structures right now proposed,
Okay.
but that there is a limit to the height of an accessory structure.
Okay,
Should they add a detached garage or a shed?
well, that's fine. I mean,
We're
that
doing
size
it.
house, you need a 12-car garage.
Accessory
but
dwelling.
We just want to make sure that that's covered because
Got to abide by the same rules you and I do.
I don't know, I like sound.
Anybody else? Okay, at that point, we'll close the public meeting. Comment, and do we have any rebuttal from the applicant? At this point? John, do you have any final things you'd like to bring up, or have you covered everything? Okay, if that's the case, do we have any final questions for either the applicant or the staff?
I certainly do. And the first question is a comment on what Sally said during her presentation about Sturman Parkway. That is currently a private road. And you said that you have been under negotiations or discussion Do we have a legal means of securing that right of way for public use in the future?
The legal means will be future amendments to the PUD
Okay,
when new proposals or different types of development are brought forward.
will you tell us a little bit about that process for that amendment?
The amendment to a PUD is a submittal by the applicant, review by the reviewing agencies, including the fire department and the city engineer. Traffic will be considered, and then it will come to the planning commission for your consideration and deliberation.
And then on to the city council.
Onto the city council in order to dedicate a right of way,
Okay,
plat and right of way.
and
dedication.
and that's very important. When they want to change their uses, there will be an amendment, and through that amendment, those things can be addressed at that time.
Yes.
We're looking at a subdivision plat tonight.
Any more?
Yep, one more.
Okay,
I did my homework, John.
I know.
Sorry. Let's look at the conditions of approval. Can we pull that up on the screen?
They're very brief.
I know, that's fine.
That's okay.
Yep. I'll also ask you to not only look at that, but let's go back to the what are your graphics on the plans? Getting close, right? Okay, let's go down to number 2, paragraph F. A building envelope. Have you seen a revised plan yet? Plat,
A revised, no.
okay.
But we have seen the application for the single family home. So we know exactly where the building envelope and the driveway will be located.
Okay, that's very important, because we're dealing with a final plat. A preliminary plat is not required for a single minor plat, I believe. So we have the building envelope that's shown. Also on one of the graphics you shown for one of the general plans showed the geologic feature, a landform called Three Sisters. I've always
That was
thought
right
that,
at the beginning.
That's it, yeah.
yeah, yeah, right there.
So
That's good enough.
it's right in here.
I always thought that was called Jean's Point. And the reason I thought it was that, because there used to be three members of our community. One guy's name was Gene Blackburn, another one Gene Kozlowski, and the other one was Gene Sperry. And for some reason, Gene Sperry told me a lot about that particular formation and the forest fires and things that went on in that area. So I thought it was kind of funny that it was called something else besides Gene's Point. That's beside it. That is a very significant geologic feature, natural feature in our community. There's not too many outcroppings like this, probably volcanic formed. Looking at that map, I'm concerned that that building envelope may encroach into that feature. I thought about it, and I thought maybe one of the possibilities to say, let's wait for this sketch plan to come in, show how that building site does or does not encroach upon that feature. But I'm thinking we have Sally.
Yeah, it does not encroach, and the name was given by Carol Sturman.
Oh, okay,
I-
okay.
Think the genes may have just,
Pulled my leg a little bit.
yes.
They were known to do that occasionally. Okay, if you're confident that that does not encroach on that feature, I am too.
Yeah, it does not.
Okay,
Because the driveway has to meet a 17% grade.
Yeah.
So it's not going to climb significantly
Yeah.
high.
you know, that and Majestic Park are just one of the most scenic areas within Woodland Park. Or I know Majestic Park is located outside, but it's really wonderful that those areas are protected and preserved.
Sally, is that Three Sisters geologically protected, anyone?
Not at the moment.
Thank you.
When we see an amendment to the plan, I'd like to see that area included within the preservation area. It only makes
We'll have
sense.
that opportunity.
Yes. Hopefully.
We will.
Okay. Thank you, Sally.
Any more, Larry? Larry,
No, I'm done. I'm
Okay.
done. Thank you.
just give me a chance. We should begin deliberation now. Expressed opinion based on evidence and findings. So it's in our court. Comments?
I've got a question just for clarification. The zoning on this particular subdivision, which will have one house on it, will be residential? Is that correct? Or is it PUD?
It's PUD.
And so it's not going to be changed over to residential for one?
No, a PUD allows for a variety of mixed uses. And it's all based on that development plan. And this is the residential area with which it's allowed to be developed.
So then later on in life, say 15, 20 years from now, since it's PUD currently, then later on they could come back and they could put more houses on that 10 acres. It's not set in stone is that correct?
They have an opportunity to subdivide the 10 acres further, but they have to meet all the subdivision regulations and design aspects. So it is possible as long as they don't exceed the 66 units in that area, unless it's amended, and 35 in the northern portion.
And
Thank
boy, we need to be back here 20 years from now. If there's a problem, that's a miracle if I do that. But seriously, you can't stop that much down the road. It's just, we can do the best we can now. And there'll be another opportunity for them to go through the plans and all the finals with John and that to do that. Okay, anybody else? I need a motion if we're going to go on. And I need a second.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve SUB 2021-06, the UYO subdivision final plat with the staff recommended conditions and the additional comment that we remove the plural references to lots.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Brown seconds it. Probably a good time to call a question.
Ken Hartsfield,
Yes.
Lee Brown,
Yes.
Ellen Carrick,
Yes.
Larry Larson,
Yes.
Vicky Good,
Yes.
John Doe,
Yes.
passes unanimously.
And so moves forward to the city council agenda on June 17th. Thank you.
This was your dress rehearsal. Okay. Thank you. It's 8 o'clock, 8:08. We're going to take a 5-minute break for those that want to visit the facilities here. And we'll start back here at 8:15. That's 9 minutes. Okay? And then we'll start with the second one. It gives you time to go home or whatever you want to do, or stay here and join the crowd, either whatever you want to do. Okay. You have a really nice voice, Dave. Okay, we'll move on to item B. Considered ordinance number 1397, repealing the 180-day occupancy limitation as it relates to the definitions of recreational park trailers and recreational vehicles. City hearing is on July 1st. Staff.
Thank you. I'll do a brief introduction and outline of ordinance 1397. First, as background information, you will all recall ordinance 1383, which actually limited the use of single-family homes in multifamily zones and updated a number of definitions. Within that update of definitions, we, Planning Commission and City Council had adopted a new definition for recreation park trailer and recreation vehicle, which included a 6-month occupancy limitation. Shortly after ordinance 1383 was adopted by City Council, they received concerns from 2 campground owners, and council enacted an emergency moratorium. Actually, that was on December 3rd through March 3rd. And then following that, there was also a moratorium for 1 year. On March 3rd, I had prepared a memo, which is attached to this staff report, providing information regarding the land use policies and status of the 3 existing campgrounds within the city limits. And I did just briefly update that memo from March 3rd on May 1st. Then on April 1st, the City Council held a work session to hear from the property owners and the citizens. They were not able to complete their information or investigation, so council decided to continue to a second work session, which occurred on April 28th. At that time, council directed staff to prepare an ordinance, a zoning amendment to repeal the 180-day consideration. That is what is before you this evening. And I will leave questions with you and discussions. I know we have folks here this evening that would like to comment on this legislative item. So, Mr. Chair, floor is yours.
This one is 1 page, so it's a little easier. Does somebody want to speak about this?
I'm Jeff Baldwin.
From Woodland Park.
Thank you, John. From Woodland Park. And, you know, the topic of conversation is the 180 days. I have 4 pages I can read to you about what happened and so forth, but it all boils down to the 180 days and a request from council. So that's where I'm going to leave it. You know, you guys can do whatever you want and it'll go to council. Thank you.
Since we really don't have a staff and an applicant, we're going to change the plans just a little bit. Okay. Okay. Now, at this point, we're kind of in between public comment and all the 4 items on the top. Anybody else want to get up and speak right now? Mr. Nakai. Well, we're going to close the opinion and then it's going to stop. Okay.
Good evening, Mike Nakai, Woodland Park. Thank you, Commission. I'm going to try to remember kind of how we got here. The previous council directed Planning Commission and the Planning Department to remove loopholes, ambiguities, contradictions in the zoning code that resulted in one of the most controversial developments in recent history. The 180-day clause is a clear example of one of these corrections. After a year of public work sessions, public hearings, Ordinance 1383 was passed by this commission and adopted by City Council in late 2020 with this 180-day limitation. It's a given in local government that the existing uses are grandfathered with a new ordinance. In each of these work sessions that I attended most of, I don't ever remember anyone suggesting that these folks get kicked to the curb. Every time this was discussed, I think Sally even emphasized that that they would need to be grandfathered. And grandfathering the current folks in the RVs and campgrounds is not only consistent with enacting a new ordinance, it's the right thing to do. Okay. I'm not sure why council didn't accept that plan, that the existing uses could be grandfathered. They should be made ironclad so that these folks have their future understood. I think they could be registered with the city, each individual. I think they could be given a policy statement from the city that explains that they're welcome to stay in these sites as long as they want. They can take their RV on the road and go to Wyoming, come back to that same site. They could buy a new RV and place it on that site because the individuals are what are grandfathered to stay here in those sites as long as they want. But eventually, over time, the use would go back to the intent that is written in the code over time. I know that there's property rights concerned here. There's you know, these campgrounds, I don't know whether these are the original owners or they purchased them, but they purchased them at 8,500 feet in Colorado. That pretty much for a campground means seasonal use. They have been, the code has always used these terms, temporary, transient, short-term, as far back as we can find in the code. So I don't think it's that big of a surprise that when the city is trying to close loopholes in the system, that this kind of an issue is raised. So I think you folks did the right thing in 2020 with Ordinance 1383. You left behind clear language so that the enforcement of your municipal code is not left to the discretion of the staff that happens to be in place at the time, because this is when these local governments get in trouble. We need clear guidance in the code. So I ask you to reject this ordinance and send it back to council with a unanimous rejection. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? If nobody else wants to talk at this point, we'll close the public comment. Excuse me.
We have Mr. Joe Fury with his hand raised. Let me bring him in.
Joe, you're on.
Thank you. Joe Fury, Woodland Park. I'd just like to also say that you know, the definition in the dictionary of camping is temporary. And I think we need to, you know, follow zoning intentions. If it's a campground, that means temporary, not years of someone living there. So I also encourage you, I have no problem with grandfathering people who are there right now in the three existing campgrounds, but I think future campgrounds should be temporary and follow the 180-day definition. And if they want tenants that stay there longer, they should be rezoned. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, and anybody else? Come on. Name, rank, serial number.
Council people, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Robin Stevenson. I am a Woodland Park resident, and I am in an RV park, and I'm a senior citizen, and I'm part of the new wave. And one of the things I want to really encourage you to consider is that some of the things we're talking about is fixing the past. And you need to do that so you have a good, solid foundation. But let's not forget about the future. And there are thousands and thousands of senior citizens today that are looking for alternative ways to live. They don't want to live in a traditional home. They don't want to live in a condominium or something like that. And one of the things that is now an opportunity for them is a tiny home. And sometimes traditional tiny homes really work and sometimes they don't. And they might, like us, find out that the tiny home is an RV. And there's very few places that you can stay in an RV full-time, long-term. And my husband is a fishing guide, and that's how we ended up here. And we are so blessed to be in a place where we were able to do that, or at least we thought we were. And again, this is a part of the new wave, new alternatives. And I'll tell you, we're not doing this to save money because it's costing me a little bit more to do this than it was to be in our condominium. I just want to leave it at that. Don't forget about opening up opportunity for new ways of doing things, for setting some precedents for the future to provide alternatives for people. Woodland Park is a phenomenal place to live. And there are many, many people who are living in the park that I am, who are business owners, who are managers of businesses here in this town. We bring a lot of money into this community, and trust me, we spend a lot of money. And if they and others like us who want to come and find a place don't have it, they're going to have to go someplace else other than Woodland Park. And it's great if we have that opportunity to be grandfathered in, but then you're limiting all these other seniors or other people that want this opportunity as well. That's
Young lady, you are refreshing. I'm going home to tell my wife I'm part of the new wave at
Yeah.
78 years old.
I love it.
just
I
got to
love
do
it.
that. Okay.
Very good. Thank you very much for your time.
This catches on, and that's just fine. We like it that way. All right.
There you go. My name is Carl Stam. I'm the president of CNS RV Park Management and Consulting, and I currently manage Woodland RV Park. The 180-day came into question, and the gentleman on the city council referred the RVIA as the source for that 180-day limitation. So I contacted the gentleman there at RVIA, and RVIA is kind of a lobbying organization, let's say. And the 180-day was like this. 180 days sounds good. And that's how they derived the 180-day. And so there's no real substance behind limiting 180 days. I don't know if you've looked at RVs that are being produced today, but they're not the 1950 version of an RV. They have dual pane windows. They have egress windows. They have better insulation than no insulation. I live in an RV. I've been living in an RV now for 10 years. And I enjoy it and I recommend it. If you haven't looked at the latest and greatest in RVs, go to a dealer and walk out with one. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. At this point, since we really don't have an applicant, we will close the public hearing. Comment. And do we have any final questions from?
I have a question as far as if an exception is going to be made for the 180 days and make it, you know, however long, 5 years, 4 years, in order to stop future owners of these RV campsites or parks from allowing it to go into disrepair. There's an example at the bottom of the hill where you see all these RVs that you know are not roadworthy. There's no way to ever get them out and have that spot used for somebody that has an RV that is roadworthy. Is there any way to have a speculation with the bylaws concerning the RV parks that it is a condition that they have current plates, state plates, whichever state that happens to be? They can provide proof of insurance, and the vehicle itself has to have the appearance of being roadworthy. Meaning you can't, I mean, if they're going to be taxed as a vehicle, then these things should be, these RVs better be ready to go on the road at any time if there's a fire that they have to evacuate just for safety. I think that as a city, we should have the ability to apply certain safety regulations, meaning plates, meaning insurance, and roadworthy appearance, meaning there's not 3 flat tires on there, just for genuine public safety, that if that has to be evacuated out of there, if there's a fire, that you're keeping in mind the safety of the citizens that live in the RV parks. Or if for some reason 20 years down the road, you have 45-year-old RVs all over there and they all have 2 tires on them and they're not currently insured, they don't have any current tags, that there is a way to remove those vehicles and consider it an abandoned vehicle because they're not keeping up with state regulations concerning a motor vehicle. You have to have a way out, that if for some reason somebody is causing some type of a safety issue, whether it's their own safety or the safety of the neighbor next to them that's at that spot, you have to be able to have a way out. You have to have a back door. And a back door would be the things that 3 things that I mentioned that you should be able to require to make sure as you're operating license in the city of Woodland Park, that you have to agree that those 3 things are met or could be met if needed.
Other people have questions on the council, on the committee? Larry, you always have a question.
I do.
Okay.
I have a question for the 2 managers, owners of the RV campgrounds currently. Approximately how, could you give us a ballpark figure, how many of your residents are currently permanent and how many are temporary?
What's your definition of?
180 days at this point.
180 days? let's see, a couple of years ago, we had 270 people come in and leave. We're a 40 site park. We had 270 in and outs. So we're mobile. I've probably got somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 5 to 6 people. And then I'd also like to respond to Commissioner Good. We run a tight ship. If your RV is older than 10 years old, we need to see that RV before it comes into the park. Okay. You have to show proof of insurance. You have to have current registration. What else am I forgetting? No, copies of the driver's license. We run the park pretty much like an apartment complex as far as information that we need from the individual to come in. Okay, if the RV is or shows needs of repair, they either have to repair it or they have to leave. Okay.
I didn't mean to insult by any means. I was just trying to figure out a way that legally, I mean, for all you know, say 5 years from now, some other guy comes in and offers $10 million for the piece of property, and he doesn't care how you run it, whatever, it's, you know, and it doesn't matter. And so what we need to do is to protect the future owners or the future people that stay there and have it as a ordinance. Some part of that regulation that just because for safety, that it is roadworthy, that there isn't, I mean, you guys, I drive by there and they're very, very clean, very well kept. But so was the one somewhere down at the bottom of the hill at one time was the same way. But things changed, ownership changed. And you need to be able to remove those vehicles that are no longer roadworthy. And it's pretty scary when you see some of the sites and it's just a hazard that if a fire went through there, most of those people, they couldn't drive out of there.
Question to you guys. If you're in a neighborhood of houses and all of a sudden these houses start looking pretty dilapidated, you know, degrading the value of the neighborhood, what does the city do about that?
You have the right to condemn it,
We haven't condemned the house now.
but you still have that right to do that. You have the right to do that as a city to keep the public safe and the person that is either renting or owning it and the buildings around it and the people around it to keep them safe. You have
And
a
that's
back
good
door.
maintenance from a city perspective. And it's good maintenance from an RV park perspective. If, like I said, if it's dilapidated, and I got to tell you some stories. I've got stories. We've had people roll in with barn siding, holding the siding on their RV on. And I have them exit. And as they're exiting, they're losing pieces of their RV. Yeah, we don't accept that.
But all I'm saying is so that in the future, say if the current owner is not there anymore and they have new ownership, this would be a good way in order to make sure that everybody is abiding by the same rules, that your park that you run is abiding by the same rules as the one across town.
Okay.
That might get 50 more people in it because, oh, you know, hey, don't worry about it, bring whatever you want and we'll let you park it there.
Yeah.
And it's just to keep some regulation and some safety standards. And I think those three things would be nice to have that
And
in
what would you
that
do?
zoning, that is a requirement that they
Right.
have to have.
I don't see it any different than if it was an apartment complex. And that apartment complex started degrading the owner wasn't maintaining it, what would you do in that situation?
Well, depending on what's going on, you could have it condemned or allowed.
You
I
could
mean,
do
they've
that
had
with the RV park
situations-
too then, right?
Correct, but with it being private property and people are renting those particular spots, it's really hard if you've allowed them to continue living there for 10 years and then suddenly they get a knock on the door, sorry, you're gonna have to move. I mean, if you have no regulation to back you up, then how are you ever gonna get them out of there? If it's a new owner or 3-generation owners later, how are you gonna have them move?
I
can't.
see it just like an apartment complex. If that apartment complex starts degrading, what type of quality individuals are you going to get to come into that apartment complex? The value is going to go down. So the quality of the individuals moving in is going to go down as well. So the same thing is true with us. If we let the quality of the RVs decline, if we let garbage accumulate, if we let junk cars accumulate, car parts and things like that, appliances sitting outside, an old refrigerator, recliner sitting outside, that's people aren't going to want to come into our park. So therefore, we're going to have to lower the price, the rent, to get these less quality individuals to come in. So if I see it the same as the apartment, you go in and you get a hold of the owner, we're condemning your park, you got to shut it down.
But legally, we have no way to inspect it. It's private property. There's nothing that the city can do at this time, from my understanding. Is that correct? It's considered private property. We can't send somebody out there to look. And especially if we don't have any of these regulations or rules, we wouldn't be allowed on there anyway.
There are provisions within the municipal code for health and safety, especially dealing with refuse, junk vehicles. So the city does have a right to be able to enter private property to mitigate health and safety issues.
So so the city would be able to go and say.
You
this
cite the
isn't-
owner. Which you do.
Yes, but it's very narrow areas. It wouldn't, in fact, we don't have a nuisance code, which gives more latitude to be able to deal with some of the nuisances that might be created with higher density spots or things that, sanitation issues, those sorts of things. So yeah, we don't have a nuisance code right now, which is when you refer to the RV park down at the bottom of the hill, that would help us to be able to apply.
And I think that would protect you guys also by having something like that. So if you have somebody in there that is doing that, if you could, it's also by
Well-
city regulations as an RV park that I have to get these following things. And if you have somebody that is kind of out there and doesn't want to do any of that, you have a second way to fall. Not only is it the RV park itself's rules, but it's the city's rules.
And city rules, as far as we're concerned, take precedence over matter of fact, we are probably tighter than what the city rules are. If you want to go out to www.woodlandrvparkco.com, we have our rules and guidelines there, and they're very comprehensive. And we do enforce our rules. And I've got a couple of residents here right now. If I had or allowed a tenant to come in and throw furniture out, car parts, we don't allow mechanical work in our park. And I'm sure if their neighbor was breaking a rule, making a mess, they're going to let me know. And then I let them know. And then they're out.
Sally, could you compare your ability to review and enforce issues arising in mobile home parks compared to RV parks? That's essentially, Title 16 enforcement action, its scope and ability to deal with problems, some of which Vicky may have been referring to, or others more generally, compared to regulation and your enforcement capability for
Yes.
RV parks.
So mobile home parks are governed under Title 16. However, the two existing mobile home parks within the city are legal non-conforming parks. They were established prior to the zoning regulations being put in place.
I'm speaking compared to, I'm not picking on any particular mobile home park.
Yeah.
I'm saying compared to a hypothetical park, a new mobile home park that was.
Yeah, a new mobile home park would have to meet all the standards in Title 16, which are much more stringent than what you see in the existing parks. So
I'm not comparing a hypothetical park, mobile home park to the existing one. I'm comparing the hypothetical mobile home park to an RV park.
to an RV park. A new mobile home park has specific spacing, requirements for paving, has requirements for water and sewer, sanitation, trash removal, and annual inspections are required. A campground does not have any standards associated in our zoning regulations other than the definitions, which speak to temporary or short-term use. So the campgrounds do not have requirements that I've got a copy of the Department of Public Health and Environment, campgrounds and recreation areas that speak to spacing, operations, roads and parking and walkways, sewage and water supply, distance, widths of roads for fire protection and things like that. Woodland Park has none of these PHE standards. So it's very loose.
Okay, and no, I'm asking just to clarify. I think this relates to some of the questions Vicky was suggesting as to what regulation could or should be in place compared to what is with the RV parks now, which in the areas we're talking about are essentially none. And by that, I don't mean to suggest that the park, your park may not meet and exceed any standard anyone could ever imagine. The issue isn't your management in your park. The issue is the issue is what might the issue, how might it be run by somebody else? Vicky says a new owner or someone else. It's depending upon the good management and high quality that someone chooses a matter of business judgment is different than having requirements in place as to whether those conditions are followed.
Have we asked enough about this yet?
Actually, Larry had actually asked both of the owners to, I think, question how many people are in there. How many have been over 180 days?
He told you 5.
And I think there was 5 for yours. So I'm interested in the other ones.
180 days?
Pardon me?
5 over 180 days?
Currently.
Okay,
Out of 40.
out of 40.
That's not including our apartments.
I'll ask the same question of Jeff too.
It's the same.
Oh, I
Same
thought
park.
it was the same. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm
We
sorry.
don't have anyone here, I don't think.
From Bristol.
from
Do you
Bristol
know how many it is in the other park?
I do not.
It is interesting. This discussion is all focusing around 5 people in one park. If it's, my impression was,
Yeah.
when the planning commission first considered this a year ago, whenever it was, coming over longer, a year and a half ago. I was certainly left with the impression that we were not talking about scores or, huge numbers of people too. We had enforcement questions occasionally that arose, and the planning department was stymied because, well, everyone knows that short term doesn't mean a year or two or three. It's hard to know what it was. 6 months, everyone agreed, seemed short term. If in fact it really is 5 people in your park, I don't know what the other, we're talking about a handful of people. If those are grandfathered, I'm not really sure the issue beyond the potential for slightly larger revenue. I've heard I think both owners, at least 2 park owners, indicate that this would impair their business model. And I don't have all that much sympathy for arguments of business model when we're talking about a small portion that's been done for years and years, known to be doubtful under the code. And in fact, at some point, as you get to the second and third year of someone being there, clearly wasn't short term. So this situation known all along is not some great surprise. And to build a business model on that just doesn't seem like it should get, there certainly shouldn't be a lot of sympathy or imagining that there's some surprise here.
I'm not taking that as good or bad here.
Well, I trust that the mobile park manager is aware of what the ordinances are. And so I've said short term, and basically it's a small number, but for the number of the 5 have simply chosen to essentially ignore it. Okay, well that's a basis for a business model, but it's not one where one should be surprised if there's some interruption. But it's particularly interesting. It's such a small portion of the business model we're talking about.
Well, if we did the attrition thing, if we had 180 day, if that was implemented, and we had people move in the 1st of May, this is very popular, the 1st of May, starting the 1st of May, and then they would have to leave the end of October. Well, that's basically shutting our business down because nobody wants to come in the middle of October.
How hard is it to move to a different spot though? I mean, I hate to be ignorant.
You mean like?
Do they stay in the park, but the regulation says 180 days, so they just move to a different spot and have them hook up the.
Well, that doesn't
propane.
make very good sense. But
that would be a way around it.
Well, or you could just move the numbers.
Correct.
Yeah.
But what I was
number 5
just.
is now 19. Yeah.
And all I was saying is that you need to have some way to have a back door. You have to have some way legislatively in order to have your back covered when you try to evict somebody because they have 2-wheel RVs there and.
We're kind of digressing.
Yeah, we've never had a problem when it comes to forcing people to move, but anybody got any more questions for moi?
Let's get back to the 180 days, okay? You can pick us up on it, okay? 180 days.
Let us finish our discussion.
Okay.
You're up. You have a question? Yes, Steve.
Well, I guess I got. So we're here to make recommendations to city council on whether we adopt or void the 180-day definition of temporary. Excuse me. I think the public session is closed.
Keep going.
So we're here to decide whether the 180 days should be eliminated and our recommendations to the council. So there's a lot of issues related to 180 days. But that's not really what's on the table tonight. I mean, we can use that to impact our decision on whether we accept the rule of the 100 days or elect to suggest turning it down. I think 180 days definitely is a good definition of what temporary is. I would suggest that maybe it's longer than should be. Personally, I think 90 days would be a better definition of temporary. It's consistent with terms in the building codes. Kind of goes back to what the original intent for this zoning use is. Recreational park trailers. Recreational doesn't imply to me permanent housing. And so having a temporary, a higher turnover, people can come in, stay a month or two, enjoy the mountains, move on to wherever else they may want to go. But as a temporary use for recreational means. I think that if there is the intent to have more long-term use of these facilities, there should be changes in the zoning ordinance to create that use. And there's a whole nother debate on whether that should happen or not. But we're here to talk about 180 days. I think the intent is met by having that turnover, and whether if they leave in July or October, that's up to the individuals and the management of the facility. So anyway, I just wanted to state that I cannot support the elimination of the 180-day definition.
Anybody, do you have a question or any statement you want to talk about?
It was back a few items ago. I do think there would be an economic fallout of it if the 180-day occupancy limitation is kept. I think there's an economic fallout to the owners of the parks.
I've kind of waited till throw my 2 cents worth in. This isn't an issue of 180 days. It's an issue of property rights. I am tired of hearing realtors saying, I have the property rights to put anything I want next to you. Well, what happened to the people that are already there? What about your ability you've worked all those years to build that up? You can't sell it to somebody else after all the money you put in it? And we're going to play that game? If you count all the houses in Woodland Park that are blight, I think they outnumber the units that you have in all the parks in the city, including the mobile home parks, which are not an RV park. Okay, they don't have to, that you've got park models. You've got all types of stuff. But it's got to be able to be pulled out of there. We've got one we've already approved with these little homes. They're not 180 days, but they don't have any wheels on them. They're not mobile to do that. So I think this is all about your property rights to run your business the way you want to. And you certainly have to have the ability to sell it to somebody, and the people aren't going to pay you any money for it unless they can keep running it that way. That's what property rights are. It's for everybody. It isn't just for new developers coming in. That's what this issue is all about. It's not about 180 days. We haven't enforced that for how long? How many decades? We haven't.
The park has operated that way for 50 years.
I know.
The water lines are buried 6 feet for that purpose.
I know that, and it's all set up that people can be there. So I don't know what we do with this.
Well, John, I beg to differ on this being a question of property rights. What the owners are, all along, there's been ordinances saying that use is short-term, temporary kinds of use.
That's never been enforced.
Okay, it's never been enforced, but that's where, now the question is, can we take a situation where the city, for various reasons, has failed to enforce it, and by raising the question now, the property owners are looking to expand their rights. They're looking to legislate a right to do something which has been prohibited all along. It's an expansion of rights here. I don't see any justification for, and that's what's being sought. Now, this isn't answering the full question. Well, I'm sure we're gonna have some more discussion around to get some wording to address it. But I think it's absolutely wrong when a statute, I think, whether it's 180 days, 90 days, or some other period, may not have been clear. It is clear that at some point, 9 months, a year or longer is not temporary.
And let's
And
remove
the
temporary.
owners have known that all along. Now, let me just as a caveat say, I think people would generally agree with this. This is not an issue that I see the individual occupants of the RVs as having been doing something wrong. Like people have agreed with grandfathering. One thing, if it helps towards the end of what we're doing, Sally or Laurie might ask, do we have existing ordinance language that talks about grandfathering that we could adopt? Because one of that ordinance doesn't have. And if there's, whether it's 180 days or leaving just a short-term use, I'd like to have that language available to make clear when recommendation back to the city council that was what our intent was. The absence of that being documented may have contributed to some of the reaction that the city council had starting last December. So I think we need to include that in whatever we propose, just so there's no doubt about it, and not just say that was the intent.
We've been charged by the city council to remove the 180 days. That's what the document she prepared.
But
If
I'm
you
saying,
don't
but
wanna
adding
do it, turn it
grandfather
down.
language would clarify
Turn
this
it down and
condition
send
and
it
what
back
you're
to the
doing.
city council.
And Lee, you probably remember in some of our information we had earlier, we had an opinion from the city attorney at that time saying that they could not render a legal opinion on whether or not people occupying an RV in a mobile home could be grandfathered in. So they just punt it and say, we can't do that. So we'd have to be creative, like you said, and how we legislate this if we wanted to try to fix
What
that.
I'm saying, by having a grandfather clause explicitly, I mean, I know there's variety in lots of statutes. I've seen them. I just haven't seen it.
Hi, everyone. I imagine you're hearing me because it says unmute. I have heard you up until about a minute ago when I saw it is asking me to unmute. I don't know if there's any way that I could hear you again. I know that you were talking about the grandfathered issue. I know that in the memo that Sally and Laura put together, they mentioned a certain option. I wouldn't necessarily think, if you want to charge the staff to look into specific language, the use itself is not, as a whole, is not grandfathered. So I wouldn't like to use that word, but in terms of people who actually live in, right now, there's something that could be done to protect them and not enforce as to those. And I know in the in this memo, it mentioned, it was either it's page 28, I think, of your packet. And I still can't hear anybody. I don't know what happened. I guess, like I said, I heard everyone from about up until 2 minutes ago. Oh yeah, and other people are writing lost audio on the Q&A.
and sell a business, they can sell it under the same regulatory regime that's existed for the last 50 years. It doesn't, there's no guarantee that absence of enforcement will continue into perpetuity.
By the time you get done with this, we're gonna have the biggest lawsuit in the world coming after us.
Well, I think what we're trying to do is to protect everybody, the park owners, as well as the people that are in there. I think with more clarification as to what can and cannot be done, I think is protecting your park. It's protecting your heirs that are gonna get them.
She's back. She's,
One question I have though, Sally, is I remember on the comp plan, there was questions concerning RV parks and the regulations. Do we have any of the data that how people responded to that? Out of 150 people, we had X said this.
Yes, I can't give you specific numbers, but it seemed like it was all over the map. So you get this has opinions on all sides and in between.
I have a suggestion. The moratorium is in place until March of next year. March of 2022. Okay, so nothing has to be done until March of 2022. So we can do a couple things. We can make the motion and we can do a second and we can vote and we can turn it down. Or, let me finish. Or we can approve it. But this thing needs to be finalized. It needs to be straightened out. The rights of the people that own the business need to be protected. The intent of what the city council really wants to do. If we have anybody left by that time, that keeps them getting smaller. So what I'm saying is, we've got plenty of time. This isn't a hurry up thing. We've got until March of next year.
Is that right? The city, there's a hearing scheduled by the city council in a month. So if we fail to take action, would that still go ahead? And I mean, I hate to hold up the city council if they're really planning something.
The code is very clear that you gotta have a recommendation from the planning commission to amend the code. So if you don't have a recommendation, they can't take action.
So
That's
we
my
could
opinion.
motion to table this?
Well,
We can also motion
Are
to turn it
we sure how much disagreement there is among us? The city council had expressly, it indicated they wished us to come back to them with an ordinance and remove the 180-day limit. I'm not sure that that's necessarily wise. I'd be prepared to do that, leaving the prior language in place, referring to short-term use, and leave the current ambiguity in place. I'd like to make certain that the RV existing people with RVs were not concerned that there's going to be some enforcement action taken to them quickly and would disrupt them. So I'd like to have a grandfather provision in it. And I suggest over a longer term, if someone believes that we should increase the rights, not limit, increase the rights of the RV owners by legislating that they have a right to have the RVs parked there indefinitely, we look at that over time, consider what kind of regulatory scheme needs to be associated, just as there's a regulatory scheme for vehicles that do not move. It's the rationale that these vehicles move was the only one I can think of why it would be totally unregulated if on a permanent basis, whereas the other one is regulated. So if we take the ordinance as drafted with a grandfather clause, the ordinance as drafted, so we're removing the 180-day limit, leaving the short-term limit, that responds to the city council, add a grandfather provision to add some comfort and security to the people who are currently there. And we look at over time, if someone feels, if it's desired to increase the rights of the owner, expand them, increase the value of their business beyond what it is currently by having a legislated right to have long-term use of these sites, we can look at it in connection with an appropriate regulatory scheme dealing with.
And how do we get there?
Pardon?
And how do we get there?
I would think the way we would get there is, as I said, take the ordinance that's currently in front of us, add a grandfather clause And I think the word will probably get back to if, at least that's my sense, that we should be looked at on a longer term basis. If there is decision to expand beyond the current rights of the owners to keep long-term people in RV parks, we should look at what kind of regulations might or might not be appropriate.
Then make the motion.
Let's have some more discussion before.
Well, yeah, I think we'll probably have, I mean, I don't know, is there any sympathy or support for that kind of a position? Or that's not, I'm listening too, if people got a better idea.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say it's me. The city attorney is online and can hear.
Nina Williams?
Yeah, it looks like we all went out for those like 5 to 10 minutes. I was saying, of course, in these 2 hours, it was those minutes, but I saw everyone writing audio's out. But whoever is doing the Zoom for you guys are muted. So I apologize for that.
What would you say, what would be your advice to the planning commission and to all parties involved of what we do now? You've listened in for a while.
Yeah, it's you guys did, like someone had said, you did spend a lot of time on this and looking into it. Temporary means temporary, recreational means recreational. It's pretty clear, and to be even clearer, time frame is a good idea, and that's I agreed with your original recommendations on this. Otherwise, it's not clear.
So are you agreeing with this is Vicky, so you're agreeing to have grandfather clause or some language to that effect to protect the current people that are there longer than 180 days, and also to protect the current and future owners of these particular parks, the RV parks? Sometimes
Two separate issues. I think the enforcement of the people who are living there, what we can do instead of grandfathering, it's on page 5 of Sally or Laura's memo on page 29 of your packet, not to enforce the 180-day limitations on the current tenants. The owners of these businesses do not have a grandfather right pursuant to zoning law. This has not been a residential. This zone is not permitted residential uses. It's permitted temporary, very clear temporary recreational. So there's no grandfathered use for that for the whole park. But in terms of equity, I agree with the planner's recommendations as to not enforce for the current tenants.
And then, as like Mr. Baldwin had stated, it has been run the same way for the last 50 years. And so it's something in there to clarify that via grandfather clause or some type of language to protect the current and future owners of said RV parks. Because they've been doing this for 50 years and now all of a sudden it's becoming an issue.
I'm not sure why if you're going to grandfather in order to change the ordinance, I don't understand.
Well, because you're not just grandfather clausing the few people that the 5 or 6 that are currently long-term renters.
That's what I was proposing.
Nina, John DeVoe, can you hear me?
Yes.
What kind of liability does the city open up to themselves for the owners of these parks that they can't sell it and realize the normal income that they've worked on for 20 or 30 years building up, and we're going to deny them the ability to do that? Is there and I know you worked for Sursa before, what's the involvement there as far as the obligation to the city concerning them?
For the zoning law is pretty clear that they do not have a grandfathered use here. I understand the equity provisions that you're bringing up. In that case, I agree with what someone else said, is to look at either amending, as to that particular zone district that they're in for the future. There's different ways to go about that.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to let you know that
touch your microphone.
There is one person with his hand up.
But our
CN.
hearing's over with.
Yeah, public
That's
comments
over. We
done.
close the public hearing.
But I just want to make sure that I didn't miss him. inadvertently, or-
We're closed. I don't think this will get decided tonight anyway.
I'd like to add a couple comments. One in 1989, the city of Woodland Park enacted an ordinance that addressed private riding stables. I remember that because I wrote that ordinance. And what that was a special ordinance that addressed that particular use. What we had at that particular moment in time, we had received a lot of complaints about a lot of horse shit and the smell and the impacts that riding stables had in residential areas. So what we did is we said, there are 21, 22 private stables in the community. They can continue to exist. But if they would make any improvements, they had to comply with the current standards we had for riding stables. With the intent that a lot of these small lots couldn't meet a 50-foot setback from on each side. We knew that. But there are provisions and way to draft specific language for a specific use that can take care of this issue. So it's possible, we've done it, we can do it, but it takes a little bit of crafting and we can get there.
We need some time.
We need time, just like you said, John. We don't have to make a decision tonight. I hear from Vicky, and I agree with her, that we need to be concerned about the safety and the operation of people living in a RV that was not intended to be a long-term residence. We have building codes that address that. We have other codes that talk about temporary living. So there's a difference there. We got to respect that. But I am very concerned about the safety. I'm also concerned with what I heard from Robin, that there is a new swelling, if you will, of people looking at RVs as being a permanent living situation. We have to recognize that as well. We also heard tonight that there's only a small percentage of people actually living in these things at this time. That being said, we considered all those things. And the staff report is very clear about the various options that we could have looked at. And we had these before us. So it went to the city council. And the city council made the decision. We've looked at this too as well. We think we can solve this by eliminating the 180-day limit. Well, I don't support that. I think the 180-day limit needs to stay in there. And I agree with Ken. I would not support my approval of this ordinance that would strike that clause. The solution would be, and as is shown on page 5 of our staff report, let's schedule a joint work session between the Planning Commission, City Council, the RV camp owners. Let's sit down and talk about these things. And we got time to come up with the right way to do it. We don't need to rush into it.
And I sure would like to see a city attorney present,
Yes.
not be involved with the writing of it.
Yes.
I agree and apologize about tonight.
I have no more to
So how would
say.
you like to get there?
How would you like to get there? Well, I think what we do is we make a motion to not approve or table the striking of the 180-day limit. And then we strongly suggest that the city council join us with the RV campground owners in a work session, and we can just have a open discussion about the possibilities of what we could or could not do.
Are we okay with that? Do I hear a second?
Yeah, can I ask in connection with that as well, the city attorney come with an alternate language that has the grandfather provision so we can.
I second his
move
motion.
with that.
Call the question.
Well, was that a motion or just a discussion point?
I
No,
didn't hear a
he
motion.
turned it into a motion. Thank
Did you,
Larry.
Larry?
I certainly could make it as a motion.
Please proceed.
Okay. The motion would be to go ahead and not approve or table this item, strike the 180-day requirement until we have an opportunity to have a work session with the city council, city attorney, and the RV camp owners and managers to flesh out all these issues, including the grandfather and the safety issues.
I second that. Call the question.
No.
Yes, that means that we are tabling it and having
Yeah.
further discussion. Yes.
No, please become, my no was based on the table and say we need a work session. I think we can come up with a recommendation, not tonight, another time before just having city council come together and talk about it. I think we can come with a view and have something to provide to the city council.
That's
Apparently we're not there.
That's what he really proposed.
Okay, well, I understood it to table it with a request to the city council for a joint work session. If it was simply to table it, I have no objection.
Okay.
I want to retract my motion. I'd like to do that
Okay.
as I stated it.
Okay, did you restate it?
Mhm.
Okay.
I'll make the motion that we table this item tonight, that would strike that until we have time to completely engage our city attorney, staff, owners, and ourselves, provide a good, solid recommendation to the city council. So is that what we were looking for?
I'll
Lee?
second.
Okay.
You took my second. Okay. Call the question.
Yes.
How do we think about this? Yes.
Vicky Good.
Yes.
John DeVoe.
Yes.
Ken Hartsfield.
Yes.
Lee Brown.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. But I wanted to make sure you understand what we're doing. Because there's not enough answers. Everybody's got to be protected. We all have property. And that's got to be protected. It still is a capitalism system. Thank you. Are we done? Do we have anything? That completes that part of it.
Item 3B. Now we're moving on to reports.
Okay. Do you have some reports?
I do. I just want to briefly.
Thanks, folks.
I'll wait until the room clears. Thank you very much. I'll be in touch.
We'll see you again.
Yeah, we were supposed to have a work session. A month or two ago.
And council took it on upon themselves to have the work session.
Okay.
So,
Call this a work session. Okay.
no.
If we don't have levity, we all go nuts.
Okay. So I just wanted to give a quick rundown of where we are with the comprehensive plan and thank everyone for the work that you're doing in your 8 subcommittees. We had a meeting earlier this week. It was this week, Monday. Yeah. And folks are working, these subcommittees are working on their goals, objectives, and actions. And we're also crafting vision statements for each chapter. The next and these are all due by June 14th in a couple of weeks, except for the Public Safety and Resiliency Committee, Emergency Management, so they can get more data from the questionnaires, Transportation, Utilities. So we'll get the questionnaire data to you as soon as possible. And Questionnaires are open to collect as much information from our citizens. So we're trying to blitz and get everybody, hopefully you've all answered your questionnaires. The last subcommittee meeting is going to be on June 28th. That will be in person at the Cultural Center, so hooray. And then after that, we are going to begin workshops with the Planning Commission. You all, I hope, have lots of energy and determination, because what we will do is take the entire draft of the comp plan and then go through it with the chairperson of the subcommittee and the scribes. So just to make sure that the entire document meets your satisfaction to be able to move to a public hearing and approval. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. So you're going to. Yes, right, exactly. You'll be looking at the substance and ensuring that is what our long-range vision and plan is for these various areas within the city.
I also heard at that work session too, that there was a lot of comment about, let's make sure we get it right and not hurry. And that there was some discussion about, well, these timelines are temporary at this point, or this is what we're shooting for.
We're shooting.
We'd like to make that. Certainly, I understand the time crunch to do that, but I agree. I think we need to be able to do it right. And each of the subcommittees need to feel comfortable that they're presenting their full picture. I know the subcommittee I'm working on with utilities, we've got a lot of work you have to do. We got that back. I don't know if we can meet that deadline. We're
And
gonna
that's
try.
fine. Yeah, I know you're being pushed, but if you need more time, we will certainly build that into the schedule.
Okay, thank you.
And then after that, we are also going to begin reviewing the land use regulations. So it's a
Cat's out of the
big,
bag.
tall order, tall order. Any other questions? We will likely meet on June 24th. Before the last meeting, because I would like for the Planning Commission to look at the land use map and just start thinking about land use. So I'm going to formulate a work session for you on June 24th as well.
That's to say we do not meet the second week of June.
Not me, no.
For instance, to deal with this current matter.
Well,
We don't know if we'll have it put, if they'll have the other end put together. Nina Williams, the attorney, city council. This has all got to come together.
Let's see. City council.
no,
We've got a job for that.
I'll let
This is
you,
a very simple, this is a very simple sentence.
It's not.
Did you say
Because it'll
June
probably be
24th or May
unconstitutional
24th?
To
June.
put restraints on RVs that you can't put on homes in this
We're
town.
past
But that's-
Yeah.
So
They're not all motor vehicles.
are you available June 10th for a work session?
We've got the task to get back to them. It could take a month, we could take 2 weeks.
Let's have a work session for the first one. And we'll go over where we're at so far.
June
And this
10th,
be the
maybe.
only
June 10th
June
June
10th
10th.
meeting,
We
a work
can-
session,
for-
just to go over this.
for the recreation vehicle.
Yes,
Yeah. Definition.
that'd be a
Work
good
session,
idea.
I mean, we can't agree even on Tuesday. We have to-
You can
In work
have,
session, we adopt a resolution with that
you,
recommendation.
you can create a consensus at the work session that then we can roll into
The next meeting.
an
Isn't it
ordinance.
just as easy to follow that? put it on the agenda just as it was tonight. If we're ready to act on it, we can act on it. We're done.
Yeah.
We still need more
And then folks will
preliminary.
Look at it and say, if Nina's not, Nina says she needs longer to find. I hate to, there's got enough things going. I'd rather close something to get correct.
And I'd like to see Nita here.
We will get.
We'll have the attorney here. Because he's pulling his hair out trying to figure out what we can't, because she had some switch chat wrong. She can't do that. She's here. She'll
Are
come
we
here. for
having a
that.
work session alone, or are we having the owners as well?
Work
And,
session, anybody can come.
Anybody,
Either way.
but
Either
invite,
way, everybody.
We're not gonna invite anybody. We're just gonna have work session. Who shows up, shows up.
June 10th
June
will be
10th,
the work
right.
session for the RVs.
Yes, I think.
June 24th
What
will
time?
be,
7?
will be the land use map work session.
Right, and probably the first reading of the ordinance language that comes out of the work session on the 10th.
That sounds good. That okay with everybody? We, none of us would
7,
agree tonight, and all for different reasons. That's really where we're at. At that point, you gotta sit back and work. Otherwise, we'll probably make the wrong decision. For some of us, and don't want to throw rocks at our cars when we go outside. But anyhow.
Who are you
as I
looking
said,
at?
It's gotta be like, I'm just looking at her. No.
Okay, I think we've got a strategy here.
Everybody good with that?
Well, one thing I wanted to talk about with the comp plan is as we go through our work sessions, which will probably happen in July, I assume.
Yes, July and August.
June
we-
10th, you'll talk about that.
And as we go through the work sessions, and if we find some provisions and some thoughts that, well, we think that subcommittee ought to address that a little bit further, or they didn't address this, so on and so forth, do we have the ability to send it back to the subcommittee and say, would you please look at this and address this, or is it going to be our
It's gonna be
responsibility?
yours. You have to move it forward.
You make
I
the
think,
call.
Larry, we shouldn't go back and have them revisit.
So the subcommittees are going to be done June 15th or after the presentation.
28th.
They'll be
28th.
done on the 28th, but we want to include them in your work sessions. So when you have questions, what was your thought behind this?
Yeah.
They'll be
Chairperson
able-
and the scribe.
The chairperson and the
Of each
scribe will be
subcommittee.
able to communicate that to you.
Okay.
But I think, we shouldn't be sending it back. We need to move forward.
That's why I asked a question. Once they make their decision, the subcommittees, and we have that work session that they're presented, we listen to it, and at that point, it's going to be our responsibility,
Right.
and let's buckle up our seatbelts, folks, because we got a lot of work to do.
Not everybody in the subcommittees are gonna be happy what comes out. We just know that's the case.
I know, and we're just going to have to take it upon ourselves to do the right thing. And if we,
We don't do the right thing, we're gonna blame Larry.
yeah,
No, I'm kidding.
I'll take that blame. I'll take
Teasing.
that blame.
I have a question. When when is council going to take applications for more planning commissioners?
Whenever we receive them.
Oh, so it's June 17th, whatever the third Thursday of Wednesday. So we have to do that.
She does.
Vicky, do you want to change your mind, leave it at 7 now? We'll stay with 7 members.
So I mean, they got it, people apply, they had, they should have a date coming up next month to hear them.
Okay.
But we have not received any applications to date.
But they have dismissed
Most
previous
of the people
applications.
are scared to go to
People will
council for
apply
anything to get
No, we're not interested in
ridiculed by some of
appointing you.
those idiots that are there. Not mentioning names.
John.
That's good.
They
Okay.
get ridiculed.
Wait, John,
Okay.
we're going to wrap things up by, first of all, thanking Vicky for her service. And
There's
maybe
no
you'll
reason
be
why
able
you
to
can
come.
change your mind.
We're gonna make you stay.
I'll make a motion that we rescind her
Accept
letter of
her.
resignation.
That's right.
Okay,
Nope, that's why we need diversity. It's not a rubber stamp.
And that's all that I have.
Motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Now you can talk about stuff.
Well,
Dave, Dave, rewind the tape about